Chapter 37. On a pirate ship, somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, sometime in the morning, 1695. Francois Dominique was everything Genevieve promised, except he wasn't French. Nor was he much of a pirate. Nor was he telling the truth about his intentions for the ladies. As Marci took her daily fencing instruction from Sebastian, she surveyed the crew working with those rescued from indentured servitude. There were 7 who had defected with the pirates, in addition to Marci, Kit, the Duchess, and Genevieve, including Millicent, young Lizzie, Juana, Una, Silent Amy, Anna, Jillian, and Agnes. Kit was earning a fine living in bartered trade, with Aaron dejectedly acting as her pimp. And Silent Amy had replaced the ship's barber surgeon, their last having been left on Ile de Vache by accident. The Duchess transferred her non-existent entourage to a large corner of the hold and continued spinning lavish tales of life at court. On the second night after their rescue, Genevieve had sullenly returned to the ladies in the hold after spending her first night aboard with Francois in the captain's cabin. "He said he couldn't sleep with me all hot and sweaty beside him," Genevieve lamented, plopping into the nearest hammock and saying little the rest of the evening. The following night, she was back with Francois in his cabin, but the strange pattern continued. Every other night, Francois would tire of her and send her back down to the hold, where she would shrug off the rejection and happily return to his bed when summoned the following evening. "Again," Sebastian demanded, repositioning Marci's right foot while tapping her elbow to force her to lift her rapier higher. "Like a deadly dance, Marci." Sebastian had been happy to find new students to mentor. Unlike the Duchess's imaginary ties to royalty, Sebastian actually was a minor earl, 89th in line for the crown of England on the Stuart side. Marci lowered the rapier and bent over to catch her breath, watching Genevieve chase Francois to the stern of the ship. "Frankie," Genevieve wailed plaintively, "why do you treat me so?" "My name is Capitan Francois," Francois scolded, shaking her hands from his elbow. "Why must you unman me with this nickname? I do not answer to Frankie." He stalked away, and Genevieve glanced up to catch Marci watching from the bow, the rapier drooping in her hand. "Bien, Marci," Sebastian nodded, taking the weapon from her hand and tilting his head in Juana's direction. "Madame Juana, I believe you are next." Marci sought out Genevieve at the rail. "Are you all right?" Genevieve hurriedly wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes as she turned. "Course I am. You know how men can be." Marci opened her mouth to answer before being interrupted by a frustrated screech overhead. "Has anyone seen Marcos?" Philip screamed from the upper deck. The crew shrugged. No one had seen the man since midday before. But Marcos wasn't the most popular person aboard, and not just because he was no sailor, but because of his position as Francois' secretary, in charge of recording, dividing, and distributing their spoils of war. But he was a handsome enough young man, and Genevieve, though she loved Frankie, had been known to hedge her bets when she felt insecure or threatened. Why, she'd been hedging her bets with her elderly employer when she was arrested for theft in London to begin with. As the days turned to a week and Francois grew colder towards her, she grew warmer to the money-handling Italian. Therefore, Marci was not wholly surprised when the dashing Italian went missing at sea, though it seemed to bother Philip, the first mate, the most. Philip, who coincidentally spent every other night with the captain, was often in his off hours in the company of the honey-skinned Marcos. "What is this?" Francois demanded of the hysterical first mate. "Marcos!" Philip cried. "He's missing! I've checked everywhere. He's gone! Something awful has happened to him, I know it!" "He'll turn up," Francois yawned, picking at an imaginary string on his cuff, refusing to look Philip in the eyes. Most of the women were drawn to the deck by the commotion, and Marci noticed Lizzie and Jillian eyeing her suspiciously.
And what if he doesn't?
Philip wailed.
What if he's dead?
Francois thought for a moment. You're correct. This could be quite serious. Francois turned to the group gathered, asking in a proper British twang they unanimously ignored. Can anyone read or do sums? Marcos has decided to leave the ship, and we'll need a new bookkeeper. Everyone shifted nervously, unsure how to answer. Marci looked around and, noticing the Duchess rising stiffly from her temporary throne of hemp rope and netting, stepped forward, admitting, I can help with that. The Duchess dropped heavily back onto her seat.
Oh, thank goodness.
Wonderful, Francois concluded, clapping his hands together before turning back to Philip with a sly smile. See, all is solved. Philip sniveled, glaring accusingly at Marci, and Francois caught his own reflection in the freshly polished bell of the portside galley and stared at himself.